like next year, and what the differences are between test optional, there's test blind. We've heard a lot of different things about tests, so it'd be really helpful to hear what you all are doing, and how everyone should be thinking about it and how they should be preparing. So why don't we start with Owen?
Jill can go. I saw you unmuted first, Jill.
Oh, thanks, Owen. I think that one thing to keep in mind about just admissions in general and what we do when we're reading applications is we are looking for reasons to admit students. And so a test score is one reason to admit a student. It is not the only reason we would admit a student. And so I think that is something to keep in mind, and a good way to frame test scores in this environment is, are these a reason to submit scores? At IU this year, we made the decision that scores would only help a student. So if a student was submitting scores for equity reasons, not every student has access to a counselor to help them figure out if they should submit scores or not. We only used scores to admit students. They were not a reason that we used to not offer admission to a student. Now, that is not the case at every school, but that's how we handled test scores this year. Test scores played a very minimal role in the awarding of scholarships. So they made a very small difference on the application. Now, this year also, I don't know that we will have the same number of students applying test optional next year. We make our livings off of trying to forecast what 17-year-olds are going to do with their lives. So we don't know what that will look like. This year, we had about 47% of our applicant pool applying test optional. Who knows what that will look like, what the testing environment looks like this summer and next fall, but that may change. We don't know what that will mean for how we're reviewing in the fall yet, but that's just a look at how we did things this year.
I think one way I've thought about it, I'm really happy to hear you say that, Jill, because I wish we did take that approach with test scores, but unfortunately with us being test optional rather than test blind, we cannot unsee something. And if someone accidentally sends us a 12 on the ACT, we have to use that. And that's unfortunate because, as Jill said, not everybody out there goes to a school like Wooten and has counselors and resources and parents that know what they're doing. So test optional, again, I think the easiest way, or the way that I've explained it to students, is that for test optional, not having a score will not hurt you, but we will evaluate the score that you send us. So a good score can help. A not as good score could be a hindrance, but not having one at all will not be viewed positively or negatively. We will just use other parts of your application. So I wish more schools would do what Indiana is doing. I think that's really cool. Perhaps I'll even try to nudge my boss in that direction. Well, good luck on that. But yeah, I think with test optional, you do need to be aware of the middle 50% at those schools, just so you've got a ballpark idea of what you're sending.
I just want to chime in something. So I see a question over here about, well, what is the benefit of applying with a test? And as Owen mentioned, a strong score can still absolutely help. Again, we're not looking, as much as this rumor always comes in that UMD, we only admit a certain amount of kids for every school, certain amount of county. You're not viewed in, or we only have X amount of spots per the class. You're looking at each is with a set of eyes. So if we pull up the information and I see a 36 on the ACT, that's absolutely going to help you. Like that just shows me it's just another piece of information that shows us your academic potential. So we are similar to Owen, are not test blind. If you submit a 12, I can't unsee it. And it's just another piece of information that unfortunately in the context of 12 would hurt you. So you got to kind of think about it in terms of, again, is this something that you want a school to see? And as I've never heard so that's so smart what you said, Owen. Strategically, you don't have to be test optional for every school. And how schools are optional can be something completely different. So always do your little bit of research. Again, having a 1600 and a 36, well, even if you have a 4.9, can still help you. Even if it's Harvard, even if it's any school, it can absolutely still help.
And I want to be clear, we're not test blind, right? there's a difference between how IU views scores and what it means to be test blind, right? Where scores play no weight whatsoever. Where at IU, a strong score can still help you. Test blind schools, which I don't know that we have any on the panel tonight, they don't want scores at all, and they won't look at them at all.
All right, thank you. Thank you for answering that. You know, well, as you know the Wooten student population, and so folks are, you know, the students are working really hard prepping for ACTs and SATs, and it's been particularly difficult in the past year plus trying to take the test. So you know, it's great to hear that you all have these adjustments that you've made. Really, and are you expecting that these are going to continue into the next year and maybe past that?
This was Indiana's first year being test optional, but we made the decision prior to COVID that we would be going test optional, which made us a little bit of an outlier in 2021 admissions, but we plan to be test optional forever. And we are flexible in our testing policy too, where if you decide to apply test optional and then you take a test in October and you're like, I did really well, I feel good about those scores, I want to switch from test optional to test inclusive, we'll let you do that. So we're like, we could do it in the pandemic, we can do this always. And hopefully we'll be able to continue being flexible in that way in other areas too.
I would just add, I think all of us on the panel are planning to be test optional next year. I don't know if that's like a final, we don't know past next application cycle for Towson, but I saw a statistic the other day. It's between 60 and 70% of colleges and universities plan to continue being test optional moving forward. And I think that's the trend in the field. Is it's what so many people want. They want to be test optional, and it's just a matter of convincing, kind of like Owen was saying earlier, the higher ups, that it's a good idea. It's the most accessible for students. It's the most equitable across the board. So I think it's what we want. It's just a matter of we're moving the field forward in that direction. But I do think the majority of colleges saw the light this year, and I think it's something that hopefully we can move forward with. There was actually legislation in Annapolis this past legislative session that was designed to basically say you can't use standardized testing. It did not pass, but it's in Annapolis, and these discussions are happening. So I think it's a trend in the field for sure. So like I said, didn't pass, but it was on the table, which is something that I think can be a good indicator.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great to hear, and it's great to hear that. I think one of you mentioned that they're spending more time looking at other things within the application, and that's great. That's great. So, thank you for the answers to that question. Following up on the question regarding foreign language, I know that we had talked a little bit about, so in our state, we have the requirement for 2 years to meet the graduation requirement. And as Ms. Taylor mentioned, we have a lot of our students take foreign language in 7th and 8th grade. And so they come into high school, they already have 2 years or 1 year, and then they're continuing. Should they continue through 3 or 4 years? Is it okay to switch to another language? Is there a preference for your colleges?
I certainly don't want to speak for everyone on here, but I don't think language is the main holdup usually. I don't think any of us are really like too hyper focused on that. My advice generally is to do whatever you want to do as long as you're graduating from your high school and you're in good standing with your high school. It'll probably be fine. Changing languages, that sounds great to me. Like as someone whose MCPS Espanol career was not super fun for me, I would have liked to change languages, but I stopped after the 10th grade. I did 7th through 10th grade, still got into Tulane, still got into colleges. It was fine. But yeah, I think for the most part, I would not, I think it's one thing to drop a language and then have a triple lunch or something, but if there's another elective class that sounds more interesting to you and more fulfilling to you, absolutely do that, is my take on the matter. I see some nodding from the other panelists, but yeah, I don't think anyone's gonna, read you the riot act for dropping Spanish after a certain period.
I would say 4 years of math is way more important. that's what, I mean, when we get your final high school transcript, that's what we're looking for is, did you complete 4 years of math in high school? If you didn't, it doesn't mean we're going to revoke your admission, but that's the thing we're focusing on, at least for us.
All right, great. Thank you. So business programs tend to be very competitive. How important is it for the business programs to stand out through, because it's been tough the last year plus. Do you need to have internships and other extracurriculars? What helps someone applying for the business school? How do they stand out from other applicants?
Because I can start with this one. I think every school, this is kind of a two-prong answer. The first thing is understand how schools review. So some schools don't review by major, some schools exclusively by major. UMD is a little bit of a hybrid. So I would say kind of it's like the first steps getting into the school, then we review for the Smith School of Business. As an actual student in the Smith School, I'm doing my MBA through Smith. I can tell you, I find it absolutely wild. Some of the things some of you are doing at 16 and some of your children are doing, like it blows my mind. It's not a prerequisite to have traded $1 million in the stock market and done an internship to admit into a top tier business school. That is not a requirement. Now, if you've done that, again, fantastic. So don't feel like the pressure that they have to have internships. The biggest thing is, as Melissa mentioned, is usually math. Just a competency in taking the 4 years. Yeah, usually if you haven't done the 4 years of math, probably not a good sign. But yeah, usually looking for competency in math, the ability to succeed in business, and you don't, some interest, but it doesn't have to be a firm. Like, again, I've done the lemonade stand since I've been 3, and now I have this multi-billion-dollar product. Like, that doesn't have to be it to get in.
And Brian, you mentioned it's been hard this year to get internships and things of that nature. Colleges are very aware of that. We have been trying to read applications through the lens of COVID and understand there wasn't football this year, or that you couldn't work at camp, or it's been harder to get some of these extracurricular experiences. So that certainly will not be viewed as a negative, and everyone around the country is in a pretty similar boat.
So along those lines, how does a student stand out if they're not able to participate in some of those extracurriculars that they normally would have had a chance to participate in?
I think at the end of the day, we're academic institutions. And so if students have not been, we would hope that students are focusing on something other than their coursework, but we hope that a lot of that attention has been able to go to academic preparation for college. And students are spending their time somehow. And so we would hope that they would be able to share that with us on the application, even if it's, they've been playing online games with their friends. They've been, doing something virtually to spend their time. That can be an activity. If that's taking up 10 hours a week, it should be part of the activities list.
Something else I'll say too is just the general, I've been reading some of the questions as they come in, and a lot of them are like, is this looked as bad? Is this good? Is this bad? Like, is this better than that? For colleges, it really doesn't play out that way. Like, that's not really how we're evaluating students. It's not a head-to-head competition. This person's better than this. I know it seems like that, and obviously it makes sense for our brains to go there when you're thinking about college admissions as a competition, but really it's not. It's about assessing if a student is a good fit academically, personally, socially for a particular institution. And if you don't get into a particular institution, that doesn't mean you're a bad person or you're not worthy or you're not smart. It just might not be lining up with what they're looking for that particular year. But when it comes to extracurriculars, something I always say, and again, I went to Whitman, I know how it is, do what you want to do. And I know that sounds like very simple advice, but so many people, oh my goodness, like I rowed crew at Whitman, and so many people would quit the rowing team and join like all these clubs that their parents made them join just to look fancier for college, or to, just to try to stand out, even though that they hated it. And to me, I personally don't think that's how you should live your life. I think you should pursue what makes you happy and what makes you you. And if a school loves you for that, great. And if a school doesn't think that that's valued, to heck with them. That's what you care about. So do what makes you happy. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to be a superhero and work at NIH and play at Carnegie Hall and win a state championship and work a job and do like 10 gajillion things. Like, just live your life. It'll be okay.
All right, thank you. Can you, I know many of you, maybe all of you, have honors programs. Can you talk a little bit about the regular general program compared to the honors program and how admission works for the honors program?
I can talk about that. I know that people were asking about honors college versus general application for Towson. So I did graduate from Towson University's honors college. So I highly recommend, no matter where you go, really consider applying for the honors college, especially if you're looking at a larger institution, because it does make it feel like a much smaller community. In our honors college, like I said, we have about 23,000 students. There's about 800 students in the honors college. So it's a much smaller community, much easier to find your niche within the campus community. But basically the difference is honors colleges typically have a special curriculum that you might take in addition to your major classes. A lot of colleges and universities have general education classes or core requirements, and you would take those honors sections of those classes instead of maybe your standard classes that you'd be taking. They might have an experiential learning piece like study abroad, an internship, research experience that you do as a capstone as part of your curriculum. But honors college classes are typically not harder than your standard classes, but they are typically smaller. So for example, like I said, Towson's average class size is 26 students. Average honors college class size is like 12 to 15 students. So it is much, much more discussion based. You have to come to class having done the reading, you're prepared to have discussions, you're prepared to really get into the meat of the conversation. So it's not harder unless you don't want to be engaged in your classes. And then yes, it's going to be a challenge for you. But I really think that you get a lot out of those classes. You can also be any major and be in the honors college. So you get the opportunity to meet students from different fields and learn or talk about things from many different perspectives, from the science perspective, from the humanities perspective. So that's really cool and engaging in those classes. A lot of times a good honors college also has a good community side too. So you have this curriculum, but you also have clubs and events that are special for honors college students, or maybe recruiters come to the campus to do interviews with specifically honors college students, or maybe there's grants for additional research for honors college students. So it's really important. These are obviously different between all these different colleges and universities. They might even call their program something different. They could be an honors college or an honors program, scholars program, whatever it is. But it's really worth looking into if that's something that you know you want to have that academic challenge and meet other students who are very ambitious. And a lot of times there's also benefits to an honors college, like scholarships that you get, potentially special housing that's like usually a little bit nicer, which is nice. And all the students that live there in the honors college. So yeah, there's all kinds of tangible, but also intangible benefits of being a part of an honors college. For us, you do have to apply early action, and it is a part of the general application. You just indicate that you're interested. There's an extra resume piece that's required, and usually a special essay. But that's going to depend on each college or university, what the application process looks like.
Thank you. Anybody else?
We all put our particular ones in the chat as well, just so people have it.
Thank you. So over the past year plus, our students have been in a virtual environment. MCPS is, or Montgomery County Public Schools, is just starting to go back now. So there may be an impact to some of the grades from the courses that the students have taken over this past year plus. How will colleges be evaluating the possible impact to grades?
I think we will attempt to do it as gracefully as possible and understand the context of the situation and understand the speed bumps that students are encountering. I think, every student in the country to a degree has gone through something similar. So hopefully across the board, things will kind of normalize, and this whole class of 2022 will be on a similar playing field. It's tough because, the transcript is the most important document we are looking at. And, yes, we do want to be understanding and try to give the benefit of the doubt where possible. But at the end of the day, the grades on there are what we use for the most part. So I can't say like, oh, it doesn't matter, but we will do our best to like understand the context behind the grades and understand what's been going on in the community at the school, just so we can have that full picture.
Yeah, I think what's unique about COVID is that it's not unique, right? That we're all experiencing this together everywhere around the world. But this is something that we've always done as universities, right? Is we've always looked for, if there if there are bumps in a transcript, if there are grade trends that are troubling, we look for reasons, right? We're detectives in the application. We're looking for, is there a reason that this semester was rough for that student? Can we find an explanation for that? And if we can't, like, do we need to reach out to the student, right? Like, should we reach out to the counselor and ask them about that? So we've always been doing this. We've always been looking for explanations behind grade trends. Now it's unique that we're seeing these grade trends on a massive scale, and we can basically point to COVID for most of them for this past year plus. And we know that this isn't just a class of 2022 issue, right? We're going to be seeing the ramifications of this past year for several years down the road.
Thank you. Have any of you heard from your colleges regarding the vaccine policy that may be in place? I know that we're starting to hear about some vaccine policies.
So I think Towson and University of Maryland, we're waiting on University System of Maryland to make that decision. And then whatever USM decides to do, I expect all the public institutions in Maryland to follow the same guidelines. The privates might follow, but the public institutions will probably all be doing the same thing, but we haven't received that guidance yet, unless Ryan knows something that I don't know. But
Yeah.
from my understanding, yeah.
Yeah, at the moment, we're highly recommend is the exact language that President Pines used. But as most of them know, and you'll see this as a common trend, USM schools will run, as most public school systems, very in unison on policies.
Okay, thank you. Are there any advantages to taking college level courses senior year? We have a partnership at Wooten with Montgomery College, our local junior college, and they offer college classes to our seniors who wish to take them. Is that beneficial to our students?
I can touch on this one because I did a whole presentation with MC and the early college ones just a week ago. I would say the way, and I'm not sure every school does it, usually the way we view early college and dual enrollment is the exact same kind of as AP and IB. And the reason before that is we want to give you the choice. Some of you want to stay in the traditional setting of doing the AP courses and the IB courses. Some of you want to get the credits earlier. The big difference from admissions point of view is really just where it comes from. From where the credits come over is a little bit different, but I'm not concerned with how many credits you're going to be receiving from your courses. I'm looking purely from this talent of you as a student. And that also just being said, this applies to Melissa and I as well. You are still a freshman applicant. So even if you do the full dual enrollment courses and you get your associate's degree, those credits can transfer over, and that's fantastic. And you can either reduce your time to graduation or possibly get some flexibility and do all of that kind of fun stuff as well. But you're still going to be applying as a freshman. You're not a transfer until you take credits beyond high school graduation.
Thank you. So when do you know, has there been any indication as to when your colleges will be opening up tours? I know we've gotten a lot of questions, and I know a lot of folks that have gone to go visit colleges. Most of them you can drive around or do some sort of virtual tour, but they're not really open for tours, although a few are.
Yeah, so we are open for tours. I will say though, I think most schools, especially those that take interest, engagement, whatever you want to call it, into consideration, they are offering alternatives if you're not ready to visit. So like we live stream tours twice a week. We have all sorts of virtual programs. So you certainly don't need to fly down to New Orleans to show interest in Tulane. If you want to, great, we'll have you, but don't feel like it's necessary or that you are shooting yourself in the foot if you don't want to get on a plane right now, which I don't. I personally, like, I would not fly to a college visit right now. I'll do the virtual stuff. So yeah, it varies school to school, state to state, but I think I just want to like put your minds at ease, especially when it comes to the schools that do look at interest, that if they are looking at interest, there are probably like virtual ways to show interest and to not put that pressure on yourself to feel ready to travel if you're not.
A lot of schools, IU included, are only offering guided tours to admitted students right now. We haven't been able, we answer to a lot of people who have to give us the go ahead to offer anything in person right now. So we've been trying to update our visit policy. And so just be patient with us. We would love to host you on campus. But yeah, let it be patient, please. And hopefully later this summer, we'll have more options for you.
That's great to hear. I know the current senior class has struggled to be able to learn about the colleges that they apply to. So it'll be good for the junior class that they'll have. Sounds like they're going to have an opportunity to do some tours. So that's great. So it looks like we're getting ready to switch out, and for everyone in this breakout to have an opportunity to speak with the other college reps in room number 1. We didn't get the 1-minute warning yet, so we probably have time for maybe one more question. Let me see what we have here. So we did hear a little bit about the plans for the fall in terms of going back to full. I think Ryan talked about that. Are any of your colleges also going to be returning to regular classes, in-person classes in the fall?
Right now, our registrar anticipates that 87% of our classes will be in person or hybrid, which means at least one meeting a week in person.
Great. Thank you.
Our hope and our plan is to be pretty much pre-COVID operations and get rid of our temporary classrooms and all of that. But, you know, who knows what's going to happen? We'll say, light your Fauci candle or whatever. We'll hope for the best here. But yeah, we would love to be back to normal, and that's the plan and the hope.
All right. Well, thank you all for answering the questions, and we're gonna welcome our next group in. So please go ahead and go into room number 1 if you'd like to go to the session with the other 3 colleges, and we're gonna switch out now. If you're having trouble moving rooms, just let me know in the chat and I will move you to the room that you want to go to, room number 1. Okay, so we're going to get started with our second breakout. Welcome to those of you that just joined us in this room. I am Brian Rapin. I am moderating, and we are taking questions. So please feel free to enter your questions into the chat, and then I will use your questions to ask our panelists. And the panelists also are going in and answering some of the more specific questions as well.
My old first grade teacher is in the room here right now. She just messaged me. I'm kind of freaking out. I hope you're doing well. It's so good to hear from you. Another parent said, She says hi, and now she's here. I'm freaking out. That's crazy. I hope you're doing well. I can't believe you have kids that are in high school now. That's crazy. That's so
It's a
cool.
small world here in
It really
Montgomery.
is. Montgomery County. Oh, wow. I turned out okay. So great job. Great job leading me on the right path in first grade.
So why don't we get started with a little bit of a different question, and I'm sure we will probably cover some of the questions that we did previously, but can you talk a little bit about what you're looking for in a teacher recommendation? And of course, we're going back to, the past year plus. It's been a little bit more difficult to get to know your teachers, since you're not seeing them in person and you're seeing them in a virtual class, and you don't really have that opportunity as much to speak with them. What are you looking for in a recommendation, and is it going to be okay that the teacher maybe doesn't know the student quite as well as they may have in a in-person environment?
So what I usually say about letters of recommendation is it's not going to be the thing that really makes a huge difference unless you're right on the line. Like it's not, if you are completely not admissible, it's not going to make you admissible. But if you are also super admissible, it's not going to make any difference. But if you're right on the line and maybe you had some struggle like in your junior year or your sophomore year, and your counselor can speak to that experience and talk about like, oh, they were going through this, or, even though they struggled in this class, they were always in that teacher's lunch, getting extra help. They really are a self-advocate. Those are the types of things where it is really helpful. But if you are kind of just right on the line, or if you are already super admissible or not at all admissible, it's not going to make much of a difference. So I usually skim letters of recommendation unless I'm looking for additional information because I really want to advocate for a student. That's
Good
my
to know.
perspective.
Thank you. What about our other colleges? Do they make a difference?
They do, but similar to Melissa, I mean, actually, let me put it to you this way: 99.9% of teachers, when you ask for a recommendation, are a teacher that you probably thinks positively of you, right? So almost all letters are very positive, and not to say that you can read some of them that just blow your socks off. And I've read them. Most of the time, they're pretty standard. Again, and when someone's already pretty set in one way or the other way, they're not making a huge jump. As well as, yeah, it's teetering the border, but it's, yeah.
Okay, so it can help if you're on the border, but otherwise not a big impact. Okay, it's good to know. Great. So another question about the honors program. Can you just share if you offer an honors program and how it differs from the regular program? And is there a special admission requirement? Do you have to, do you determine honors admission based on the regular application, or do you have a separate application process?
For us, it
So-
is the, oh, sorry. It is the same application for us. We automatically consider students for the honors program. I believe Indiana, I forget from the first one, but yeah, for many schools, it is not separate necessarily. So if you get admitted to Tulane, in your letter would be, the news that you've gotten in, any potential scholarship, and an invitation to honors if you get one. For us, like being a medium-sized school, I will say it's not a night and day difference necessarily. You're not in a totally separate part of campus or anything like that, but there are a few extra academic access opportunities. Access is the word that they usually have us use to describe the program. Thesis advising, help with applying for Fulbright scholarships, Marshall scholarships, things of that nature, and then the honors residential learning community as an option. But to be honest, it's not the end of the world. I was not an honor student at Tulane, and I still had a very positive experience and still got to know my professors very, very well. But it certainly can add a nice wrinkle to your academic experience.
Yeah, it totally depends on the school, what your honors experience will be. At IU, about 10% of our freshman class will be offered admission into the honors program. And again, it can be a living experience. Students choose into it at IU. I kind of Our honors program is called the Hutton Honors College. I refer to it as a choose your own adventure program. You can choose into as many or as few honors experiences as you want. A lot of honors programs and honors colleges will be a lot more holistic and residential in nature where everyone lives together. But definitely something to look into at any school you're applying to.
Ours is not automatic consideration for the honors college. You do have to basically indicate that you're interested. You have to apply early action, which is not binding. That's December 1st for us. You'll want to apply by the deadline anyway, because that's when you're considered for merit scholarships and the only time you're considered. But if you fill out that early action application, there is also a section where it says, do you want to apply for the honors college? You would check yes. It does have its own resume and its own specific essay. So you do have to opt in to be considered for the honors college. And those are 2 decision letters. So you'll get a general admissions decision letter first, no matter what that decision is, that admissions decision stands. Then you'll get a second letter letting you know whether or not you got into the honors college. So even if you don't get into honors college, you still have your original acceptance to the university.
Great. And Ryan, what about University of Maryland?
We're very similar. Again, honors is going to enhance, I think, your experience, but it's not going to make or break it. Your major is still going to be exactly the same no matter what. It's just your living learning program. Your freshman year will just be a little bit slightly elevated for those general education classes. But we, unlike Towson, review all at once. When you receive your decision, you'll know if your honors, admissions, major. That's why we take 4 months to do it. Yeah, a lot of steps.
And so is it one application and you get considered?
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. As long as you apply November 1, you're automatically considered. You don't have to do anything special.
Great. Okay, thank you. For our next question, what do you look for on the student's transcript? Do you consider the number of AP classes that are taken, and do you recalculate GPA?
Something I would say, especially at a school like Wooten, I would not get too caught up or stress yourself out too much about how many, like getting into the ticky-tack counting of how many AP courses you've taken. It really is about rigor and admission officers and offices feeling confident that you can do the work once you get to the university. And, you know, taking that one extra class usually will not make or break it. As Ryan was saying, like, you know, very few things are like a make or break deal. You know, it's a body of work that we're looking for. For us, we do recalculate GPAs. I don't know. Do you guys want to just raise your hand real quick if you also do a recal? Maybe not. Okay. But we do a core unweighted GPA. So rigor is a factor. I know earlier someone was saying we don't want someone to take a totally easy schedule and skate by getting all A's. And even though mathematically they would have a 4.0, that rigor maybe wouldn't, you know, look as good as someone who has taken some challenging courses and pushed themselves. So when you're choosing APs, choose ones that you think you'll enjoy and that you can succeed in. And there's no point in taking a bunch and just getting C's and D's in all of them.
Yeah, we recalculate your GPAs, but we base it on this this weird scale that's based on the this big county that I don't think you've ever heard of. It's called Montgomery County. So we're taking it directly from the MC because that's how we are basing every other school on you. So you do not have to worry about yours being.
Okay, thank you. What is the importance of extracurricular activities, leadership positions, community service in the admissions process?
I would say it's a really great way to add more information to your application, especially if you're applying test optional. The original idea behind sending test scores like SAT or ACT was to level the playing field because different counties across the country, different states across the country they offer different AP classes, IB classes, dual enrollment. Some of them offer none of it. So the idea was to level the playing field so that everyone has a score that says, okay, we're all being tested by the same information. So the score should be more, equitable, but obviously that is not the case. That's why we want to go test optional, but that was the idea. So that tells you that those extracurriculars that maybe some schools don't offer are really helpful if you do have them, because I think it shows us who you are outside of the classroom, and it makes you not just a number, you're not just a GPA, you're not just a test score, you are going to be involved in the community. And those extra things help us to picture you in our campus communities. That's what we're ultimately doing when we're reviewing your application, is imagining what you would be like in our campus. So to see that you're super involved in things, even if it's a part-time job, like even if it's not some like National Honor Society or something, that's still really valued, because that shows that you have priorities, you know how to, make sure that you're balancing those things. So I think those things are helpful for us seeing you as a full person and not just those numbers.
How about one of the other colleges?
I think extracurricular activities, again, we're thinking about, you're obviously coming to an academic institution, so your grades are going to set the tone for everything. We also want you to make a difference on campus. And so that's why I think the extracurricular activities are not going to offset poor grades, but they're going to enhance it. It's not just a minor thing we're looking at, but we want to see people involved. And it's not just one cookie cutter thing that you've done, okay, Eagle Scout and student government, and that's the checklist. And that's what we want this year. We just want people that are passionate about something. I think it's a beauty why big schools exist, and even smaller schools. Like, it's going to be bigger than Wooten, and we want people of differing interests and differing activities. And I think that's what we're looking for, is just the common theme of passion. And as Owen already kind of mentioned, don't do anything just for college application, because it shows, and then it's not really worth your time, to be perfectly honest with you. Find whatever interests you, bring it to campus, and you're going to find a place where you can extend that passion on a college campus.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I don't want to assume when anyone else on the panel grew up, but when I was growing up in the late 90s and I was getting ready to apply for college, I was told that colleges were looking for well-rounded students. And so I felt like I had to do everything, right? I was like on the newspaper staff, I was in band, I was a cheerleader, I like everything, like key club. I tried to do it all. Whether I did that well or not, it was 20 years ago. It doesn't matter anymore. I'm not sure, but we're not looking for every single student to be well-rounded, nor are we looking for one type of student to fill our class. Even at small schools, like there's not like one type of student that's going to be the best. The type of student who's going to be most successful in any college setting is one who is willing to put themselves out there and do the things that they want to do, whether it's because they want to do them, not because they were told it would look good on an application and it would get them into college or it would get them a good job. So do what you want to do because you love it.
That should be able to come through in the application, hopefully. Okay, thank you. So we talked a little bit before about AP classes, and certainly we have a lot of students who take a good amount of AP courses. There's a question in the chat in terms of, do you accept credit for the AP test scores? And if you do, what is the score that would get a student credit at your school?
4s and 5s for us, and I think most universities publish a chart so you can make sure. I think the main criteria is being that the university offers a similar class. So like human geography, I don't think we give credit for. There's a couple that we don't, but for the most part, it's pretty standard, and there should be a chart out there.
And for most schools, there's not going to be a limit necessarily on AP credit, but most schools will have a general transfer credit limit. So it's like for us, it's 60 credit hours, which is, you can transfer in as a junior, but we won't transfer more than that.
I would just note, this is kind of just more of a tip, because I know a lot of you are very, very intelligent. For anyone looking at very, very uber competitive schools, i.e. Ivy League schools, some of them don't take any AP credits. And that's because they want you to do all 4 years in a cohort style with them together. It's not Maryland. I'm just giving you advice on, not every school will take it, and there's a purposeful reason behind it, why they don't do it.
So in reviewing applications, what criteria is used? How do you review those applications in terms of what is the most important to the other things that maybe are not the most important. I know we talked a little bit about test scores, and a number of you said that the test scores, might help if you're on the border, or or they're optional and they don't need to include them at all. But if they do include them, they can't be unseen. Can you tell us how the GPA compared to the test scores compares to the recommendations and the essays? Like how do you look at that and determine admission for a student?
Someone was saying earlier that at the end of the day, we are all academic institutions, and we're going to start with your academics. I think a small silver lining of the pandemic has, been a lot of schools adopting a test optional policy and realizing we can still, bring in amazing, talented students without having to look at test scores. And there's been research out there for years that shows that your high school transcript is the better indicator of your success in college. So I think most schools will say the transcript is the single most important thing that we're looking at. The test score can kind of be a shortcut sometimes if you have two students who have very similar records, but again, it's a very flawed metric. From there, though, I mean, at Tulane, something we say a lot, like we got 45,000 applications this year. 2/3 of the people who applied are, big air quotes if you're not watching, smart enough to be successful here, right? So then from there, how do we even begin to figure out who to admit? So your extracurriculars can be important. Interest at many schools is becoming important, and Tulane admittedly is a little notorious in that field. The letters of recommendation can help round out what you're like, but it's hard to say any single thing after the transcript is as important as the transcript. It really does become a body of work, but we start there with the transcript.
I think very similar. I think most schools would say the same thing too. The analogy I always kind of use is if you think about a 4-course meal, your grades and test scores, if you decide to submit them, are that meat and potatoes. They're the main entree. You can have a fabulous dessert, but if you went to a $200 steak, steak dinner, your dessert was great, but your steak was overcooked, you're not going to be happy with it, no matter how great that chocolate souffle is. And I kind of just on a side kind of note, I want to mention talking about test scores and kind of what is the trends we've kind of seen. Applications, of course, have gone up significantly. I think that's a lot of with the COVID situation, but also when you remove the test scores, what does that kind of do to the back end information? Well, a lot more students were in that more competitive bubble. That's kind of what happened when you eliminated test scores. Some students that were eliminated were not. And so while we, of course, did not penalize anyone, and I think this is very common across any schools, we didn't penalize anyone for not submitting test scores, the threshold might have increased. To just kind of understand that when we're kind of thinking of test optional as it's great, it's a fabulous thing kind of going forward, but it also means schools have kind of gotten more competitive too, just because a lot more people are in that range.
Makes sense. All right, we have a couple of more minutes. Are there any other questions? So I do have a question about selecting a major. Do you require the students to select a major when they're applying, or can they decide later what their major is?
So Towson is major blind. There's a place for you to put your major on the application, but we don't take it into consideration at all. The only majors that are an exception to that are performing arts, because you do have to do an audition in your senior year, but everything else, you can change your major at any time when you come into the university, and you can be undecided. Undecided is probably the most popular major coming in, and that is fine. I'm sure all of us have career centers, have advisors who are there to help you kind of navigate and figure out what you'd like to do, what you're interested in. Some colleges even offer classes that you can take that are basically designed to help you with finding a career that you're interested in. You can take it in your first year. So yeah, it's okay if you don't know. And even if you think you know, it's okay if you change it 2 or 3 times in college. And you'll find a lot more common than you might expect.
What about IU?
Sorry, I'm replying in the chat. Can you remind me one more time about the question?
Oh, yeah. So do you need to select your major ahead of time?
No, but kind of yes. for some programs. So similar to Towson, performing arts, you should know ahead of time. You basically get one chance to audition coming in as an incoming freshman. But for other programs, you can come in exploratory, which about 60% of our students start off in university division, and then they apply for a school or college that houses their major at the end of their freshman year. Some students, we do ask for an intended major on our application, but it doesn't have an impact on their admission to IU. So that our office, the Office of Admissions, is offering admission to IU and not to specific schools or colleges. So after you've been admitted to IU, you may be offered direct admission to a specific school if you have listed an intended major there. But it's not required to study in that program that you have direct admission. So even if you wanted to study in the Kelley School of Business, you didn't have direct admission, you could still come to IU, study business, and apply at the end of your freshman year.
Thank you. So I have one last question for tonight, and then we're going to close out. Do you, any of you have summer programs at your universities where students could go and get a little bit of the college experience to see if the college is a good fit for them? And that would include also, somebody had asked about ROTC, so maybe you can, if you had that as well, please let us know.
We have both, but unfortunately, I think our summer programs are all virtual. So to be honest, I probably should be recommending them, but like you said, the part of the goal is to see if the school is a good fit. And I think that's really hard to ascertain in Zoom class compared to like living on campus and being around the people and, eating the food and all of that. So is it the best use of your time? I don't know. I mean, the academic component is still there, meeting professors, but certainly isn't the same as like living on campus. And then we do have all four for RTC, all four branches.
Great, thank you.
We have a number of summer programs. If you go to admissions.indiana.edu and search pre-college programs, you can see some of our offerings. Some of them may be in person. I think some of the smaller ones will be, but definitely something to check out. I think especially for sophomores, because hopefully between their junior and senior year, we can be in person again. And IU offers Air Force and Army ROTC programs.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I just looked, some of your siblings may have done it. Turk Young Scholars, again, program because we're the closest, but virtually this year in July. Same thing, and all four branches of RC.
So we don't have summer programs. We might have a math one in the future. It hasn't been fully cemented yet, but that might be coming down the way. But right now we do not. We have Air Force and Army, and we work with actually University of Maryland, and we work with Loyola for those. So you would actually be leaving campus to do your ROTC program, but we do have them.
All right, thank you. Thank you, panelists. We appreciate you joining us tonight. I know it's late, and thank you everyone for joining tonight. I hope you received a lot of good information, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next PTSA meeting next month in May. Thank you all and have a great night.